Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience, episode number 123. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black Entrepreneur Experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards. It's all about expression and illuminating your brand to increase your visibility. Melanie Richards is developer and founder of Increase Your Visibility seminars. Hello, Melanie. How are you?
I'm great, Frances. How are you?
I am perfect. I'd like to start our interviews off with allowing my guests to give their own bio, because you have a very extensive bio and I have just given like a tad bit about you. Why don't you share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your business?
I'm a girl from the Bronx and a teacher's kid. And one of the things Mom always had us focus on was education. So I started out in promotional products and then made the leap to part-time entrepreneur. And part of the fuel for becoming an entrepreneur and going into business has been education. So it's really cool years later in my second brand. Increase Your Visibility was a seminar I did in 2008, and now it's the name of my business.
Did you work a traditional job out of college?
I certainly did. I was a finance major and an accounting minor. I started out working through Robert Half for a technical school in the accounting department.
So how do you transition from this finance person, which is a great background for business, into parlaying into your own business? Talk about that backstory, Melanie.
The finance journey and starting to work in the field. I had temped in the field, but I had never been full-time in the field. After my first full-time job, I realized it wasn't for me. And I spent a lot of time moving away from it. I ended up in the garment industry, which was fabulous, working every angle of the garment industry, from a buying office to textiles to import coordination. And that led me into computers back in the punch cards day. And I fell in love with DOS. And the DOS part led me into an operations background. And that became the entree to move into other industries. And I temped for a promotional products person who needed someone to do his books. I had moved away from it, and that's what now ended up in a career that I've been in for 26 years. I fought being an entrepreneur. I absolutely fought. Business student, business background, didn't feel it was me. I loved the corporate background. I loved the bonuses, the freedom of being able to travel with set vacations. And two friends were much smarter than I. They pushed me into becoming a part-time entrepreneur.
And how did you go from part-time to full-time?
That I bought a book called The Art of Quitting, and we were going into Tahiti. I was planning on reading the book so I could quit my job of 13 years when I came back. And the universe had a much better plan for me. The week that I was getting ready to go on vacation, somebody said goodbye. That was always a sign in corporate. Time to get ready to pack your desk. Time to get ready to leave. I pulled out gospel music and did my happy dance, packed things up silently. I was so happy at work, and that last day I took the leap before vacation and into full-time entrepreneur.
One of the big questions, Melanie, that a lot of people want to know is, how did you finance your business?
In the beginning, and this was the important part of being there full time, I had amazing credit. I really, really paid everything off in a timely manner. And in the beginning, I started my business without even a line of credit. And that was a luxury. We're not necessarily in that world right now. People are looking for venture capital, and they're looking for other people to help them finance, or a business partner. But back then, I was lucky enough, if not of being the best saver, of at least knowing the importance of financing and order. And that really was the key in the beginning. I was able to get the credit to expand my business and to scale up.
Talk about that aha moment that you knew your business was going to be successful.
I was at our first real trade show. It was a Chamber of Commerce expo, and we were still setting up. I realized, and I was hoping, it was a show in front of business people, and I was really hoping everything would be perfect that day. So of course I made a zillion mistakes. And our first guest, as we're still setting up, was from New York Military Academy. We were still setting up when she left. The next guest was Tony from Directorate of Cadet Activities at West Point. And that was the moment I knew we were in the right place. Tony stayed with us for about 45 minutes. She asked where we came from. She asked me my background. She asked me why she had never met me before. And that's when I realized, right place, right time. Thank you, universe. Then I knew we'd be okay.
You talked about two other individuals that convinced you to take the leap. Do you have business partners? Are you in this with a team? Talk about who's in this journey with you.
Right now, my family's a really big support, and I have a talented virtual assistant who's in St. Louis, who I was lucky enough to find online. She helps provide support for events, and I have a bunch of strategic partners. So we can't do it all as a business. You have to decide, and we all have to decide whether we want to stay small or whether we want to be able to scale and scale up. And I have a business now where I can call in strategic partners or alliances to help me complete any project of any size. I didn't have that flexibility in the beginning. And I think having been in corporate and having run departments and having people reporting to you, I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to be a home-based entrepreneur, but I decided I wanted a mobile business. And because of that, I have partners now. We can pack up and go, whether it's servicing an event or it's helping a client or the ability to work remotely. So some days it's a small team of 2. Other days it can be a much larger team of up to 20 or more.
Tell us, Melanie, what you are most grateful for right now in your life.
I'm most grateful of having started a business from the perspective of learning how to color outside of the lines. My wonderful mother-in-law gave me a card years ago. I still have it in a really good spot. And she said I needed to learn how to color outside of the lines. Before I started my business, I was afraid of driving. I was a part-time entrepreneur, and just before I became a full-time entrepreneur, I finally learned how to drive. The expansion of comfort zones and the ability really to comfortably have a conversation with anybody, those are some of the gifts.
What is some advice that you wish you would have known prior to starting your business?
Before I started my business, I wish I understood the concept of collaboration. When you're an employee, you're working with other people in departments. You're working with your boss. You're working on outside projects. When you're in your own business, that entrepreneurial mindset shift and how to have support as you grow and through all stages, I wish I understood that better. We were the magazine generation. Now everything's digital. You can listen to talented podcasts like yours, or you can learn. But I think in the beginning, I needed to know that I needed coaching, because as you're taking steps, you're going to reach hurdles where you need somebody with more experience to help you navigate them. You'll need people with confidence and courage to help motivate you and inspire you on days when you're not really feeling it.
How do you vet your coach?
I have been extremely lucky. I believe I've got really amazing angels. I want to thank them again. I would meet a person in business who was so opposite. Maybe we had opposite backgrounds, opposite families. And I believe for me, the key is finding somebody who we've never walked in each other's shoes. And that's something that I've used now to vet. Somebody else with a different skill set of experiences who occasionally asks me a question, a hard question, and I know I'm willing to do the work to answer it. Those are the people that I really am interested in having as a business coach. They challenge you to do more, find more, search more, reach for more.
Who's your ideal client?
My ideal client are talented entrepreneurs and talented teams who really care about making the world a better place. They have a product or a service or a program that they're interested in moving out of the shadows, whether it's moving from part-time entrepreneur to full-time, or whether it's moving from what I call moving from invisible to be visible, and from be visible to profitable.
And how do you do that?
We do that now in 9 steps, and I've broken it down from having a hard time opening doors in the beginning. As a part-time entrepreneur, I didn't have time to network. I didn't have time to go to conferences. I understand the challenges of doing it in time constraints. So what I suggest is that people start with a plan, and that they start then by designing a process, by figuring out who they want to attract, and by refining it, figuring out what works and what didn't work. Another way to do it, and depending on whether it's an entrepreneur or a team, is I consider plan, design, attract, and refine as the beginning. And the next step, I think of doing things to kind of elevate, to kind of amplify what you're doing. And those I like to call SOARs: style, opportunities, approach, results, and solutions. And the results part, the other side of that really is risks, because for every win, there's an obstacle. And those are really the 9 steps that I would suggest, and that I love working with people to help them figure out which of the steps they want to take today, next week, next month, next year, and how to help their team members get inspired and motivated to do the same so that their teams grow and are successful.
You mentioned the word risk. What is, you could either call it risk or failure or what is the worst moment in business for you, and what was your takeaway?
The worst moment was realizing that after the first 10 years, as we were celebrating the 10-year anniversary, and I realized I had outgrown the 5-year plan. In the beginning, I had a 5-year plan, and as we grew past it, I wasn't prepared to continue ascending under that original name. And I found out the risk for me was, after all the time of trying to be visible, to be seen, to be heard, was that people had me confused with other companies that had the word promotions in their name. And I had become a commodity without intending to. That part was hard, becoming so attached to a name, to a brand, to a way of operating within chambers and other membership organizations. And the art of celebrating, hitting 10 years, really helped me understand it was time to start over in a new way, and that I needed to start the personal development part that I hadn't taken the time to do since I moved from being an employee to an entrepreneur. It was time really to focus in on the education, which was my core. It was a risk because people are like, you're changing your name. We knew you as the gift lady. Who are you now? And the risk was of not being seen, of not being heard, and really of not being understood. It really helped push me into a really big self-discovery period, and it brought me back to increase your visibility.
So what's working well for you now in your business, Melanie?
Face-to-face networking, which has, for years, I was so uncomfortable in the beginning. I'm an introvert. Now, after years in business, I'm an ambivert. There are times when I just want to curl up in a good, comfortable chair with tea or coffee and a good friend or a book, and I don't feel like networking. But the other days, networking and being pushed past my comfort zones, that really is the part that's working now. I've learned so much about communication styles. You know, when we were kids in the Bronx, Mom would always say, be careful who you sit next to on the bus or the train as you're traveling to school. I now feel that in business, that's become a strength, to follow that instinct.
What is a daily or a weekly habit that you do consistently that has given you the greatest success?
I meet somebody at an event, and in the beginning, I would put business cards that I collected near my driver's license. That meant go see them. Near my debit card, that meant hopefully I was going to get paid. And now in my eyeglass case, I take people's business cards that I meet that I want to reach out to or that I want to connect with, and I put them in my eyeglass case as a habit. So the next time I reach for the glasses, I'm reminded to follow up. I will go to an event and come home and start following up that night, whether it's reaching out on social media, or maybe you offer to share an article, or you're sharing some sort of resource that somebody needed, an introduction to somebody else. I try and make the introduction before I go to sleep.
We can learn from successful entrepreneurs or brands. Tell us a brand or a business that is dominating or you admire and why.
That brand would have to be Tracking Wonder. So a gentleman, Jeffrey Davis, he's a thought leader that I've been following for about the last 2 years. It is a brand that inspires you to operate your business with integrity. It's a brand that inspires you to treat your clients as if they're heroes and you're trying to help a hero accomplish a goal. So you think of your clients in the most positive way possible, and you provide solutions that are centered around them. One of the things I love is Tracking Wonder has a book. I think that was my first introduction, Right to Lead. So Jeffrey Davis is an author. He is a speaker, a presenter. He gives a lot of workshops. He has learning labs, kind of think tanks. And it's an opportunity and a brand to engage with as an entrepreneur. I love, too, that the newsletters come out on Sunday. It's kind of a good frame for your week. You have podcasts that you can listen to, great articles on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And the brand is absolutely inspiring. He reminds you that do it together is better than do it yourself.
I like that. Who are your top 2 influencers in life and what lessons do they teach you?
My mom has to be one of the biggest influencers in my life. And as a teacher, the reminder to keep learning. As a friend, the reminder that we're all human and that we have to be really careful who we hold up to a higher standard, because we're all human and we're all going to make mistakes. The other one I would definitely have to say would be Maya Angelou, somebody who inspired me as an author, as an actress, as a woman, as a poet. A reminder to really take bigger steps, but really to acknowledge, as you said before, whether we call it a failure or we call it a lesson learned, whether we call it an obstacle or a hurdle that we tackled, that it really is about how we approach things.
Melanie, talk to a younger you. What would you say to a younger you?
To a younger me, I would say locate your own voice a little bit sooner in the process. I really found my voice after my first 10 years in business. I wish I had had that voice. Some days, I wish I had had that voice from the beginning with my first company, because Increase Your Visibility came up to me in 2008. It took a while to realize that it really resonated. I believe that the younger me, I listened, and I would sometimes save a quote. I would save an article. The younger me needed to know, don't just save it. Have the courage to act on it. Have the courage to pursue it. Don't be afraid to try it. Don't be afraid to upscale it. If I couldn't figure out a way to approach it, learn to ask for help. And that was something that it took me a long time. I started a business and I didn't have a coach for the first 4 years of my business. The younger me, I could have used a coach much sooner.
Speaking of quotes, what is your favorite quote or saying?
My favorite saying has to be, a comment that a gentleman helped inspire me with just before I learned how to drive. And it is, I am consciously living life, and it brings me joy, peace, and independence.
That is beautiful. Tell us a technology tool or technology platform that is a must-have for you in managing your business day to day.
It's Google. I was on the phone with my tech person earlier, and learning as you grow that you need a place to store documents, that you need a place to be able to share tools. My virtual assistant finally got me into using Google Calendar. It took a while. I was a planner girl. I'd pull out my paper and my pen, and I still have tons of notepads. But learning to use Google and technology tools to open new doors for myself. I didn't understand that was the wonder of them or the magic of them.
Melanie, you said something. We're going to kind of go back a couple of questions, and you said something that was pretty profound, and you said you wish you had your voice. It took you 10 years to really let that voice be heard. And someone's listening to this podcast and they're saying, how did you discover your voice? How did you find your voice? What are some tips or strategies if they're struggling with letting their voice be heard?
One of the biggest helps for me was I had migraines from basically 11 into probably about 6 years ago. And around the same time that I was rebranding, I was on Facebook and I saw two heads. I thought it was a migraine tool cure, a natural, and I was always into natural solutions for migraines and headaches, having had them for such a long time. And I saw two heads, and the two heads weren't a migraine cure. It was a link to click on a profile assessment for Sally Hogshead's How to Fascinate. Clicking on the link took me to a profile result that I wasn't sure that it sounded like me. One of the things that I really appreciated about it was that it came from the perspective of her first book, or her second book, I think, which is How the World Sees You. It was a really good tool to teach me that I could help anybody else in marketing and in business. I was willing to help open doors for everybody else, but I wasn't my own cheerleader. I didn't encourage myself the same way that I would encourage others. And the tool helped me learn that occasionally I was playing poker. I would have a need or a project or something that I was working on, and it taught me that I needed to be more specific up front, to learn to ask for help, and in some cases to learn to ask for buy-in. It really showed me that I was creative. I've been into the arts since I was a kid, but it really taught me that occasionally I would really hide my inner voice. I would let somebody else have the light or the spotlight. I'm good with it. I don't need to be the person on stage necessarily, and I don't need to be the person who's running the room. I'm happy that somebody maybe is there who occasionally you can help. But it really taught me to step out of my own shadow, to go past and go farther, because sometimes we don't trust people. I was a Me Too girl, and I learned that at a young age, that you sometimes have things that change your voice, that change how you show up, and whether you're fully, truly present. And I can say now, I really am fully present. And in the beginning, I was not always willing to be seen. That's one of the most interesting parts now of having a business that says increase your visibility. I understand the struggle.
And thank you for that, Melanie. It's really interesting that we're having this conversation because I've been doing some very deep diving recently over the last week. And I don't know if you know Rochelle Pratt.
No, I don't.
Oh, she's an influencer, and it's about telling your story, really getting your story out. But she did an episode on my show, and it was really amazing. And she did a session with me, and she was talking to me and saying, I don't hear your story. You're not telling your story. And it was so interesting. I actually, prior to us getting on the phone, I reached back to a friend, And I was saying, I need you to pull out my story. Like, what is causing me to, like, I'm diving into helping dieters eliminate frustration and guilt, empowering them to lose weight, that whole coaching thing around weight. And I always say that was really my journey, right? Like, my career, after 3 degrees later, I really should have been a nutritionist. And so I would push my story down and I wouldn't share my story. And even when I talk about my why, I would surround my why around my grandchild or my father. It was not my why. So I appreciate you saying that about your voice. And when you talk about being in corporate America and your experience was so amazing, like you said, you were very comfortable. And my experience, all the years that I've worked in corporate America, I hated every job. And I know I'm going to get some backlash from that because I've had people say, don't say you hate. That's a very strong word, but it's authentically who I am. I worked because I needed the money, but I was not passionate about any of the work that I was doing. And so I would never be able to express authentically who I was on my jobs. It was always masking my voice. I couldn't ever be out there. I didn't ever talk about my family. I was just there. And so I appreciate you saying, so now I am so authentically who I am that, like, I do not want anyone in my space that I don't want in my space. Like, I don't want to work with anybody. I don't want to be around anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody that I cannot be authentically me, because for 30 something years, I've had to walk on eggshells and I don't want to do it anymore.
Thank you for that. It's a real reminder that trust and transparency, the really big difference that's helped me recently was hosting my first retreat last year. And the real reminder from somebody I talked to the day of the retreat, who reminded me that I needed to be seen, that if I wasn't seen, then I wouldn't show up to help and serve others. It really was the biggest aha moment from what had been holding me back, really from sharing stories. If you're not in an environment where you trust people, if you're not, and I wouldn't just say trust, I think it's the word implicit is there. You know, you may have a colleague who you trust, but they're not your bestie in the sense of you sharing anything personal, but you really do trust them to help you, complete a project or complete a task or complete a goal. But that word implicit there, I think for us to really show up and be ourselves is we have to trust that whether it's guidance from a universe, guidance from a higher power, knowing who you are and knowing who you want to help and how you want to serve them and how willing you are to serve them, I think that really helps us share stories we would never normally share on any other day.
Absolutely. Melanie, if someone wrote a book about you today, what would we learn that we don't know?
So I have a book idea in mind, and that book title would be really with a lot of question marks on it. And it would say, My Angels Are Laughing While They're Munching on Popcorn. I think from choosing sometimes whether we're fully present or not, and I've done it a lot, and the act of not being seen as an employee or as a manager or occasionally as a woman or in the beginning as an entrepreneur, I think they'd learn that we need to be really careful with the mask that we wear each day. That the days when we don't show up, people are seeing a side or they're learning something that I didn't necessarily want to share. I didn't want to share a mistrust in some cases. And in the beginning, it's funny to say how comfortable I am at times at networking now. I was terrified in the beginning of what I called networking vultures. They would learn that I had to get rid of the magnet that appeared to be an invisible sign that said kick me or kick here strike here. We have people sometimes, they seem like maybe it's that they're not into the greater good and they're not into sharing good with everybody. I think there are givers who gain and takers who take. And I think in that movie, I now have a very different strategy for dealing with takers who take. As you said before, they're not part of the equation. I will acknowledge them. I will be polite. I will be courteous, but I'm not willing to sit at the table with them.
Absolutely.
And that's what the movie would show.
Melanie, what is the one impact you want this interview to give to our audience?
I'd like entrepreneurs to remember, as a good friend said to me many years ago, progress, not perfection. That somewhere in there, learning that we have a good, a better, and a best, and that on some days, our good is good enough. When we start out, sometimes you want every product to be perfect, every delivery of a service to be perfect, every program as a coach to be perfect. And it's the real reminder that the impact that we have on others and that they have on us, that's really to be determined. We don't really have a magic key that opens doors. It would be nice to imagine them, but that we really have to give ourselves the permission to live fully and to be free.
Talk about work-life effectiveness and how do you make it happen in your business and your life?
So I've learned now that other than on days when there are networking events, I am not a morning girl. And one of my favorite shirts from my mom says, "So not a morning girl." It's a reminder that sometimes when working on a client's project, I will work until 2 to 3 to 4 a.m. in the morning. And I've learned to give myself permission to take that next day off, to take that next afternoon off, sometimes to take that next evening off. So I now have blocks of time for delivery of work, delivery of service, and really to recharge. We've got to take really good care of our brains. And as you would say, with the clean eating, and Francis, we're going to talk about this in another conversation. We have to do those really healthy things so that we feel balanced, whether it's a massage, whether it's a walk, whether it's getting your nails done, whether it's, having a cup of tea with a good friend. That balance part. I'm a real believer now in the family first. I was the workaholic who would work 15, 16 hours a day in my 20s. Friends would call me at 10 o'clock at night at work. "We know you're still there. We're coming into the city. It's time for you to leave work. We'll drive you home." I didn't know how to balance that in the beginning. And now I've learned when I have the tenaciousness or tenacity to complete a project, I go for it. When I'm not feeling it, there's something telling me to take a break. And I think we have to remember to give ourselves permission to do that.
Talk about self-care and what do you do for self-care?
My favorite thing to do, and I'm looking forward to doing it this weekend, is a detox foot bath and a dry sauna. It's some quiet time to reduce inflammation and to really think and to kind of be free. The other thing I love to do is reading will take me places. I always have a bag of books. Sometimes, and I've started now, I used to read a book a day. Those days are gone because I'm no longer the commuter, and as an entrepreneur, we're reading blogs or other things, but I now have a couple of things sometimes that I'm reading at any given time.
So what are you reading now?
Right now, I'm reading 3 things. I'm reading Alice Walker's wonderful book of poetry from the heart. A friend bought me a signed copy. I have a podcast on pause from Tracking Wonder. And another friend who's a client gave me a book on something called Ascension. So I'm reading the book on Ascension. And I always have a journal open and a pen so that I can write.
What have you not done in life that you dream about often?
I want to go to Australia and go to Sydney. I want to walk up that beautiful bridge that people show you that you can take a little leap. I want to see what the Sydney Opera House looks like. I want to go to New Zealand. And it's interesting because I love to cruise. I want to go on one of those like 3-week cruises that leaves from near the Sydney Opera House. And I love to travel, and it's time for another big grand trip.
Melanie, what is your biggest achievement so far in your business?
I believe it's mentorship. I had no idea until I was on a panel last month and we were talking about how to help others. I really believe in mentoring others so that we can help them start fires or help them locate their ignition switch to kind of move forward. We don't need to necessarily be around for the rest of the journey. If they need help, they know we're there. But I love helping people who feel like they're standing still or that they were moving backward. I love helping them feel like they're getting started.
What is something we should know about your industry that we don't know as consumers?
Marketing is something that I believe we need to spend more time planning before we act. We need to spend more time listening to the people that we want to serve before we come up with a core message, before we hire a graphic designer, before we buy a website, before we pay for a social media ad. We need to really be in touch with who it is that we want to help. These days, people sometimes believe that good marketing means that they'll instantly be profitable the next day. But I believe we need to spend more time on the back end, almost being a geek, collecting some information, looking at some metrics. People talk also about an ideal client. I know for me, I have 2 types of clients. They're entrepreneurs and their teams. Somebody said, tie it down to a niche. We waste a lot of time trying to find a niche. I think we need to find people we want to help solve problems, and that'll lead us to the niche.
If you conducted this interview, what is the one question that you would have asked yourself? And I'd like you to ask the question and answer it.
I believe the one question is, on the days that are gray days, on the days when you don't really feel like the hustle or the step or starting, what is it that inspires you to take a forward step or to shake it off? And for me, the answer would be faith. I am grateful to be surrounded by really loving, supportive family that at times laughs at some of my ideas, but always supports them. That reminds me on the days when I'm not sure what my why is. Jeffrey Davis put up a graphic recently, act on your why, and act on your why every day. That's the hard part, I think, of entrepreneur, of business. I really understand that challenge. We all get stuck. And what is it that keeps you moving forward? I think that's the only thing I would have thought of to add.
Share with our audience a parting piece of advice you want to offer.
I'd love to offer, in marketing, I think we should have a chance to do test drives. We should have a chance to test a solution. And I think making a safe place, finding a safe team that will give you really honest, clear feedback in a way that you really feel is constructive or helpful, not destructive, and really being able to hear that feedback. It may not change your why, it may not change your action, it may not change your direction, but it will increase your awareness. I think that part is really important. You know, like the kids say, stay woke, you know? And sometimes in business, we have to remember to keep collecting information from people who don't agree. It'll help us refine our process and become more successful.
Melanie, we've come to the part of our interview. It's called Fun Facts Lightning Round. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'd like you to answer them quickly. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Fun Facts Lightning Round?
Yes, Francis.
The last movie you saw?
The last movie I saw, it's been such a long time. I better pass. That's pretty bad.
You relax doing what?
Bowling. Tonight is bowling.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
My favorite singer has to be, it's a tie, Mesa and Rochelle Farrell.
Your favorite dance song?
My favorite dance song is, I'm a Bruno Mars girl. I would say Uptown Funk.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
Every week, broccoli.
Your favorite month?
My favorite month is July.
Melanie, thank you so much for joining us on Black Entrepreneur Experience. Why don't you share with our audience before you conclude the best way for them to connect with you and to reach out and to do business with you?
Thanks, Francis. The best way to find me is to find Increase Your Visibility on Facebook or to find Melanie Richards on LinkedIn. I have a blog, the letter B and the word visible, VISIBLE. Follow me somewhere on Be Visible with Mel, and I'd love to connect for virtual tea or coffee. There's an invitation on my Facebook page and on my LinkedIn page to do so.
Melanie, thank you so much. That's a wrap.
Thanks, Dr. Francis. Have an amazing day.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.